Welcome, everyone. I'm Harish. I'm the founder of Goodspeed. So we are a low-code and AI agency. We use tools like Bubble, n8n, Framer to build websites, software, and automations. And one of the most exciting projects that we've built is Sizzlekick, which really changed my perspective on what you can build with low-code and AI. And so I wanted to spread the word about the great product and what I believe is a great process. Because like I said, now there's so many AI changes, and I think this really shifts a perspective on what can be built and how you can build. And so thanks to Andy for taking time out. And today we'll talk about how to empower your sales team with Andy. I'll let you say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm not technical at all, so I'm going to be talking more from a kind of founder, entrepreneur perspective on how I found the process. But yeah, it's been incredible learning curve working with Harry and the team to launch Sizzlekick, which is basically a tool to help coach and improve the sales performance of sales teams using Salesforce. So we're going to talk about that, the product a little bit, and the journey we've been on in this session, and hopefully be some useful insights. It's been yeah, it's been quite interesting compared to what I've done before. I've been doing SaaS. My first SaaS business was in 2003 and exited that in 2007. So I've been around this merry-go-round a few times, but this has been quite different. So hopefully you'll get something useful from the session today. Nice.
So what we'll do is we'll talk through the problem, then we'll speak a bit about the product, then the process, and then it will be collaborative and give everyone a chance to ask questions, whether it's about Bubble specifically, whether it's about how you can use AI, whether it's about Sizzlekick. The floor is open. But let's start with the problem, Andy, because you said that it's very different to previous. And you're a sales expert.
Allegedly, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Just talk us through the problem that you set out to solve, why it was such a compelling problem, and a bit about, perhaps the original business.
Yeah, so sales is hard work. I've been in B2B SaaS sales, since whenever that started, 2003, so 20 plus years. And there's this constant problem of having one or two people on your sales team who crush their target, and then a bunch of other people who don't quite get there. I think there's a Salesforce report there, the most recent one said something like 64 or 65% of people are not going to hit, salespeople are not expecting to hit their revenue targets in 2026. So for any business, that represents a massive cost, i.e. we're paying 2/3 of our sales salary bill is not generating revenue. So the challenge for a head of sales is I've got these two people or three or whatever who are smashing it out of the park, and all these other people who aren't. And it's very hard to work out what the difference is between those two things using Salesforce. It's a great CRM, but reporting's really tricky. And heads of sales are under time pressure, so they don't have time to go through and crunch all the numbers and figure it out. What we really need is figure out what's the gap between these people and what can they do to get closer to those people. So instead of 65% of people missing their target, maybe we have 65% of people hitting their target. And that's really the nubbin of the problem. When we met Harry, we thought AI could help with this. And that's the problem we set out to fix. And I think the reason we thought AI was the answer is because of the number of variables in the problem, in that every single one of these people and these people up here are going to have different challenges in what they're doing. They're going to have different needs. They're going to have different motivators. It's not a one size fits all thing. You don't just say everybody copy Bob. It's going to be, Jim needs to do this, Sarah this, Jane that, and it changes over time. And AI is very good at spotting those sorts of patterns. And then from our experience with We Thrive about coaching and personalizing feedback from engagement surveys, we wanted to create individualized activity plans and coaching plans for salespeople. So that was the problem, and that's a little bit on the solution that we came up with and why we thought AI was the answer.
Nowadays, I see a lot of people wanting to just jump in and build with AI. The difference between them and what you're building with Sizzlekick is you had the unique insight from We Thrive. And I think that combination of the identified problem and your unique insight is very compelling. You touched on it there, but with WeThrive, can you just explain a bit about what WeThrive is and what insights you got from there?
Yeah, so that was the next business that I founded, and that's really been looking at employee engagement surveys and performance management, and the two problems we were fixing there. And I'm sure loads of the people on these calls have been asked to fill in engagement surveys in the past, and then absolutely nothing happened as a result of your feedback, which is really frustrating and disengaging, in fact. So we used a particular psychological model called the Human Givens framework to help organizations understand how people are getting their innate human needs met through the experience they're having at work, and then turning that round into, well, what can you actually do to help people have a happier, more fruitful time at work? So it was always about understanding humans first as individuals, and then what it was that they needed for them to feel happier and more engaged at work and enjoying what they're doing, to move to a better place for them, so they were happier and less likely to leave, and also creating more value for the organization. So I've been doing that for a long time for some really good UK organizations, all sorts of people. And it was that we wanted to then, that learning and understanding we wanted to take to a different problem, or a more specific problem of sales performance, which is a problem and a challenge that I've faced throughout my career. I've always been able to sell stuff, but it's been often very hard to get other people to do it as well. So how could we use that learning and fix it? And then we partnered with Salesforce, because they're the biggest CRM on the planet, 150,000 customers, got a really good app exchange. So the route to market's attractive for a smaller player like us. And then it was trying to find the right people to help us fix the problem, and that's where Harry and Janae and everybody came in.
Nice. So then let's talk about the solution that you came up with, which is Sizzlekit. Yeah. So Andy, do you want to just talk us through about the offering? You spoke about the problem, but the solution of Sizzlekit, and specifically the features that make it so compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is heads of sales don't have time to run a gazillion reports. I've used Salesforce multiple times. I've worked with sales improvement for organizations who've used Salesforce. It is really difficult to get a clear picture of where everybody is at in terms of their specific metrics on one screen. So job number one for me was creating a dashboard where a head of sales can look at their team and say, who's going the right way, who's going the wrong way, and what could I do to help them as their leader, as well as what could they do to help themselves and coach themselves, because heads of sales are getting pulled into deal clinics, they're getting asked for forecasts every 5 minutes from the CFO, whatever. There's just, I don't know, 4 or 5 days a month of non-sales management activity that you end up having to do. So when I do have time to coach the team, I want to know, where can I have the most value in the shortest period of time to have the biggest impact? And so what Sizzlekit does is it looks at what we call the most effective seller, looks at all their metrics, how are they converting leads to meetings, meetings to opportunities, opportunities to won deals, what their average order values like, their sales time, their conversion rates, when are they making their calls, how are they writing their emails. We can pull call transcripts in from platforms like SalesLoft and find out what they're actually saying in their discovery calls, and then basically compare that to the lower performers and say, well, where's the gap, and which thing, if we closed it, would have the biggest impact on their outturn in terms of revenue. And then as Harry's got on there, the platform can suggest specific challenges around activity, behavior, and skills, and then nurture and remind and support each agent or rep to, I'm very nervous about using the word agent these days because it means something different. Salesperson, real person, human person, nudge them along to get that complete, and then circle back to the metrics to see if the improvements have been made, and keep repeating that cycle as a good coach would until that becomes the new normal, and then move on to the next thing. So that's a kind of coaching piece. And then the other bit is prioritizing leads. So which leads should I be focusing on that most likely to close, and then how should I approach those? So we can see here, for example, having looked at the top performers and how they're writing their intros and what have you, Sizzlekit can then draft appropriate emails. So you can just say, tap in which of the 3 leads I should chase today, and it'll pick out the 3 that it thinks are most likely to close and write me a cold intro email. And we've already scraped the client's website. We know all their case studies. We know how they compare to the competitors, got their sales playbooks uploaded in there. We know what sales framework you're using, if it's MedPick or Spin or whatever. And so we can make sure that the content creation is completely aligned with the organization. And all of those things just take blockers out of the way. So if people are making more calls, doing them in a better way, so they're saying the right stuff, pitching benefits, not features, writing great content, prioritizing the right leads, yeah, you're gonna get a better result out the other end of the machine.
One of the things that I remember when we scoped it out and we were discussing early is this notion that AI products nowadays look very similar. The designs are similar. You can tell if it's been vibe coded. Something that was very intentional from your side in building Sizzy is the interface to make it like very easy to chat with, and gamification. Can you just talk a bit about why that was so important?
Yeah, I mean,
in building the product.
I mean, Apple made that how it is. Nobody, if you open a phone now, you expect a nice experience. And I think one of the key challenges for any app, but particular platform, and particularly I think for sales, is it's got to be nice and easy to use and deliver impact and benefit for the end user. It's hard enough to get salespeople to fill in Salesforce without getting to use another product. So if it was ugly, they would look at it and go, yuck, I'm not touching that. And if the UX and the way it worked and how it helped them wasn't up to scratch, then they would also probably just not bother using it. So for that reason, user experience was really important. And we also had to build a native version to run with inside Salesforce. So we replicated the UI that you can see in the app here within the Salesforce environment as well. So it looks different. And I think that also helps make it stand out from, as you say, everything that looks the same. But you'll see we kind of use similar UI cues to ChatGPT so that there's that familiarity of copying prompts or flagging incorrect responses or whatever, to make sure that people weren't having to, it wasn't radically different to what they've maybe been used to using.
And I think then ensuring people don't have to think or worry about what they have to write and have free text, which is like A, quite overwhelming for a user, but then B, probably harder to build from a technical perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the features I love, we haven't got it on this little thingy bob, but in the bottom right there's the commands thing. So what a client can do is they can set up commands or prompts that they want their salespeople to run, so that the salesperson doesn't really have to do any thinking. They just push a button and then it's kind of directing them where the head of sales wants them to go. And then the follow-on prompts, as you get with ChatGPT, help narrow them down to where they want to go and then create a challenge. So it makes it really easy for people to do it. And the other thing I love about, as I said, I'm not technical, but the bubble thing is the ability to actually run that as an app on your phone. And that as well, I think is a really useful tool for people who are field-based as well.
Nowadays, so many people are creating apps and products which can connect to others. You spoke about Salesforce being the biggest CRM, and I think people probably overlook the distribution. Can you just talk about why Salesforce was such an important part to integrate with Sizzy? Because there's one thing just having Sizzlekick on its own as a web app that can support sales teams. You were intentional about making sure it could connect, not just connect to Salesforce, but also be available on the App Exchange.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a process, as you remember, Harry, to get through that. I think, I sort of liken the App Exchange to a shopping mall or shopping centre, as we say in the UK, as with a big Salesforce badge on it, and all Salesforce customers pop in there and look for stuff. So, yeah, I think as a smaller player, having gone through all of the hurdles to get approved, it gives you some creds, and it removes a big barrier to sale of, are these guys serious? Do they know what they're doing? Because we've been through all of the hoops, and my goodness, there were some hoops to get through. But the prize is we're now in the mall in front of 150,000 people. It's quite a lot you can do on your exchange listing to get traffic and get visitors. So yeah, that was really important to us. And then the connection with SalesLoft was a similar play in that, they've got less clients, I think 6,000 or 7,000, but again, they have an active app exchange. So, the idea is, how can we as a smaller organization piggyback on bigger organizations' marketing spend to benefit from that?
Yeah.
And the in cost is the development work to meet their criteria, which I think is a good thing, because we know we've built a great product, and their clients know we've built a great product, because otherwise it wouldn't be in there.
Yeah, amazing. One of the things that I love now about AI products is that it helps people scale without scaling the team. And I think coaching is such a good example of that, because like, I mean, when I joined Google, they flew me to San Francisco. I had a week of sales training, and then I didn't really have any more sales training, but that was such an impactful week for me for the rest of my career. I think now what you're doing with Sizzlekick is helping to scale coaching. Why do you think coaching is such an important aspect within the new solutions of AI?
Well, I think the old, like what you just said, you did get sent on the training course. Awesome. Yeah, if it's a great course, but I can't remember what it's called. There's a curve of stuff you remember or stuff you forget. And it's something silly like, a month after you've done a training course, you've forgotten 80% of it or whatever. So, coaching is about personalizing the intervention and the training based on what you need at a particular point in time, and then supporting you and reinforcing that, so that becomes a new behavior. So suppose you're, I don't know, you always ask closed questions in your sales calls. That's not great. You need to be asking open questions. Just telling you in a sales training session, ask more open questions and leaving you to it, chances are by week number 2, you've forgotten and you're back to your old habits. So coaching is about catching you doing that again and saying, don't do that. Try it this way. Here's the benefit, and constantly going back around that. And the reason AI is great for that is because you need to make that personalized in terms of how you deliver it. So how I would want to be coached will be different to Harry, to Junaid, to David. And then the second part is what every one of us needs at any point in time will be different. And that's why AI is so powerful, because it can work with that degree of variance, whereas a standard, thing that we would have built before would have been a one size fits all, probably. And that doesn't land so well with people.
Yeah. And what I love about it is it actually applies to so many different industries. It can apply to coaching in every industry, whether it's sports, general teaching, you name it. And so there's certainly so many ideas that people can apply and take for themselves to just scale coaching in any industry.
I think what's important is, you can go and open up ChatGPT and say, hey, how can I sell more stuff? And it will give you some useful ideas, but it's missing context. And that's why the connection to Salesforce is so important, because the data is the context. It's the, where am I at in the sales process? What are my metrics? And then coaching you relative to that, rather than just a generic sales coaching module. So you need that data, you need the qualitative stuff, the emails, you need the call transcripts. I see Junaid nodding over there. If we had fun pulling those in, because it's all about the context. So that's what's really important about the application of AI. It needs to be within, like a specific problem you're trying to nail, and then you need to put the guardrails in to make sure that the AI is looking at the right data. And then you need to be really careful about hallucinations, because if you give somebody a really stupid coaching recommendation, you lose them. So we spent a lot of time, and Janae's going to nod at that one. Training and refining, I don't know what you call them, API calls or webhooks or whatever it was, to make sure we picked out exactly the right data across the right time span for the right people, and brought that into our model in the right way, so that Sizzlekick could make some intelligent recommendations from that data. And that took a long time to get that right, I think.
And when it comes from, when people are looking at AI opportunities, the nice thing I think with Sizzlekick is that it did come from unique insight that you had with WeThrive. It didn't just come from a random idea and thinking, oh, this is a cool opportunity. It came because of your insight in coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the art of entrepreneurial stuff, is to find that intersection of, some skills, a business problem, and some technology that can fix a problem. And I mean, I don't know. I think being quite rifle shot about the problem you're trying to fix is really good, and not trying to be too broad and being all things to all people.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that out there, you know. So nailing a chunky problem thoroughly is better than kind of spreading yourself too thin and trying to do too much. That's my take anyway.
Yeah, and we worked to get to that. We worked on that together, right? From starting with the very core problem to doing discovery. And so Goodspeed supported Andy and the Sizzlekick team to bring this to life. And we built it with a combination of low-code tools, Bubble, Flowise, n8n, OpenAI, and all the new AI tools that were constantly launched with this iterative approach, along with Salesforce, to be available on the App Exchange. When we met, Andy, I think you didn't know about no code, right? No, and so when we first told you what we could do,
I laughed my head off. I said, no chance, mate.
how did you think about that new approach? Because traditionally, you built and sold your own SaaS tool. It was with traditional code. Just talk to us about that, and then I'll talk a bit about our process.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I couldn't get my head around, and it was almost too good to be true, was what you said you could build and the price you could build it for, and how quickly you said you could build it. It fried my brain, to be frank. I couldn't reconcile those things, that promise, with my experience of building. I didn't do the building, but obviously paying other organizations to code, or having, we had a reasonably chunky tech team in my first business. The time it took to go from an idea on a whiteboard to a requirements document to a spec to some video, whatever, that whole sort of process was long and painful. And I thought, there's no way on this planet that these guys can deliver this, but Harry seems like he knows what he's talking about, so we'll go for it. And I don't want to swear on here, but beat me, you did it. And for me, that was a revelation. And obviously it's down to Junaid's obviously very good and did some good coding there. But yeah, this kind of no code approach, I think, is great because it allows you to try some stuff. If we'd have wanted to try and launch Sizzlekick with the old approach, we would probably, we wouldn't have a product by now, and we'd probably spend quite a bit more money and we'd be no further forward. Whereas now we have a product that's live in the App Exchange, and we've got people using it, and it still blows my mind. And we'll talk about the new project that we're doing with you in maybe at the end, but yeah, it's remarkable.
What were your initial concerns, or because you've previously worked with huge companies, so there might have been maybe safety concerns, security concerns, etc. But what were some of your concerns? One of them was whether we could actually do what we say we can do. What were the other worries or concerns you had?
Well, that it was kind of new. It was new to us. We knew what we were doing before might have been slow and a bit painful, but we ultimately knew it worked. I think there was a concern about kind of ownership of the code. If we're writing it in or you're writing it in Bubble, do we own the code or do they own the code? And then the other bit is really around, before you'd have your database server and your this, that, and the other, and it was all fairly well contained. But now you have all those different things that you mentioned, n8n and Pinecone and Wingnut and all these other whatever bits of software whizzing data around all over the place. It's just, for a bit of a dinosaur like me, it's quite hard to get your head around how these different tools operate. But what I think is really powerful, and it happened through our build, was something better came out, and it does every 5 minutes. And you could sort of slot it. You could just take out this thing and put in another thing that was better. And so I think it means that we can benefit from the latest, most effective tools that come out, whereas people without that architecture can't. And that gives us a competitive advantage and some agility that I think is beneficial as a smaller player.
So as a smaller team, and I know the team well, and it's amazing what you guys have achieved. It's actually about, you know, you're saying that leveraging these low code and AI tools was a competitive advantage because it helped you move a lot quicker.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can take a bit of a punt on a feature or change direction or pivot. And we've talked about this with SizzleKick. We've pivoted a few times. Rollkick, the new product, we've pivoted a few times, and you can afford to do that because your technical debt, you call it, I think, in your world. Yeah, you haven't built up a whole load of technical debt that you can't. Oh, nuts! I can't do this because I've got to refactor all of that code. I don't know how it actually works, but you can slot the new thing in and you can try this new feature, and it happens quickly, and that means you can afford to take some chances and build some stuff for people to try out without burning a whole development budget. So I think that's also really compelling, so we can react to the feedback from those early adopters and the people who try the product.
Part of what we built here was a combination of the landing page on Framer, the web app on Bubble, with a combination of Flowise, n8n for the AI side. I felt sometimes even you were getting involved in the product and making some tweaks, whereas before you wouldn't. How comfortable did you feel in terms of understanding the product or the ability for you to make small changes?
Well, I mean, it was funny because we'd get a release and have a look at it, and I go, yeah, it's kind of almost what I had in mind, but it's just not quite there. So challenges would be an example where you guys had got it to generate a challenge, but the way that was going to actually work for an individual just wasn't going to work. And I said, well, it really needs to create a kind of container for the challenge with some actions under it and some dates, and then hold them accountable to that. And you guys went, oh yeah, no problem. and then Junaid worked some wizardry, and then bingo, it was there, you know. Whereas I know for a fact, if that had been in the old world, that would have been, okay, well, we need to have a requirements gathering session, and that's another 20 grand and whatever. And it was like, oh yeah, no problem. I think, yep, we can do that. And then 5 days later, needed a bit of tweaking, but it was 90% there. So I felt like I could comment if I wasn't happy with something, and it wouldn't be an eye rolling, budget killer. It was oh, okay, I see what you mean, and then come back with something workable. So it's much more iterative and agile, which is really good when you're creating something new, because you don't know the full picture until you start to see it working.
One thing that I loved when I first was introduced to low-code tools and AI tools is that it just changed my perspective on what is possible. I didn't know. I thought, okay, with no code, maybe you can create a cool website. And now one of the reasons I was passionate to showcase what we've done with SizzleKick is you can build a full AI sales agent that connects to Salesforce. How has this tech changed your perspective as an entrepreneur in building products?
Yeah, I mean, it opens up, the idea of being able to go from a whiteboard to something that works, an MVP, very quickly, but it doesn't need to be limited to something kind of simple. It can be something quite sophisticated, like we've built together. So I think it opens up the opportunity to create sort of like these rifle shot solutions for not a huge amount of money very quickly. And actually, if you built 2 or 3 of them and one of them failed or 2 of them failed and the other one took off, you'd probably still come out on top. So you can have the scope to take a few risks, I think, and not have the full picture before you start, because if you're not quite right, you need to go left a bit, right a bit. You can easily adapt in the process, and I think that's really powerful, rather than you commit to a 6-month development sprint and then it's not right, and then you're knackered because you've got to do another 3-month one to put it right again.
The agility you mentioned, and I think, we have a shared Slack channel, right? So we would constantly be in communication to make sure that you always know what's going on. At Goodspeed, the way that we work is we have a 4-step process. So number 1, what we would do, and I can actually share some of this, is discovery. And so this is a complete discovery process, which starts with a series of workshops. Because of the ease of AI now where you see everyone creating seemingly full prototypes in a minute, you know, it's important to take a step back and go slow to go fast. And that's an ethos for us. So what we did when building Sizzy was to take a step back and say, what problem are we actually trying to solve? And that's with discovery. So that's what we do, is a 2+ week sprint to make sure we really understand the user needs, the features, the branding, the user flows. And this is just to kick it off, so then we can go deeper. But this is really about going slow to go fast to make sure that actually we're building the right thing. Andy, on this, how important is discovery for you?
Yeah, it was interesting. It felt like, oh, I have so many questions, like these workshops and whatnot. But it was really helpful to be asked those questions to clarify in our own minds what we were after. And I liked the fact that it was very much focused on the business problem. It wasn't really focused on code or screens. It was what problem are we trying to fix for who, and what would great look like for them, and then what are the constituent parts of that we would need to address, and how would those sort of chunks and blocks work, and what would the flow look like? So I found that really helpful. And I also like the text, I don't know if that's the next thing, but the text spike thing, where you then took what we talked about and said, well, what technology would help us do that? And then you build a little text spike. It didn't look very pretty, but we could actually see it doing the thing. And that also gave a great deal of confidence in terms of the direction of travel.
I think that's very important, because again, I think most people will just say yes, like yes, we can do it, and sign. I think for us, it's important to give everyone, ourselves included, confidence that we know exactly what we're designing and developing to make sure we're building the right tech. And so that tech spike is to answer all those questions. And part of that, we believe, is, you know, we have to know that the engine works before we build the whole car. And the sooner we do that, the higher confidence everyone has in our ability to execute. And so that's making sure we're building, you know, if it's an integration, to make sure that we're checking the API documentation and we're building the right thing. And in this case, it's also, what are the right prompts that we're using to have the nudges, reminders, unlocks, challenges. The sooner we get them, because that's the engine of the business, the better the product.
Yeah. And I think it really helps that idea in the founder or whoever's cooked up the idea to start to see the reality and then iterate their ideas. And the process catered for that and allowed us to, gave us a few days to think about it and say, that direction's not quite right. Could we do this? Could we do that? And because we're doing it in Figma or whatever, it meant we could make those changes before somebody started cutting code, and we had the tech spike working, so we knew we could pull the right information from Salesforce. So that in itself was comforting. And then you looked at the Figma things and you could start to build that picture. So I think that's a really important part. And it felt a little bit like nothing much was happening.
Yeah.
Well, there was stuff happening, but there wasn't anything being written. But then when those two things kind of came together and we signed off, then actually the progress was really rapid. And it's like, holy smokes, here's some stuff, and it's working. So go fast to go slow to go fast. I'm definitely bought into that.
It is that go slow to go fast. And I often think today that's more important than ever, because people think you can just build so quickly. That's the necessary step, because otherwise it's just a problem later down the line. And so in this case, after discovery, we went into low fidelity wireframes to understand what a new user, low performer, high performer would do, work together on a brand actually, and what would make like necessary illustrations, understanding the people that will use it, and then brought it out into what would be beautiful designs. And so have every screen mocked out so that when we develop it, it's so much easier. And so this would be our process to say, what does it look like? What does a login look like for each screen? What are the alternative responses? And then here, Andy, when you talk about iterations, that's allowing you to comment before we build it.
Yeah. And it's funny because if I say something, if we both look at some words in a spec doc, everyone on this call would have a different picture of what that looks like in their mind. And what's really good about this is process is, I couldn't believe you did almost every screen, but it just meant we had time to go really think about, is that what we want someone to see? Is that going to be helpful to them? And we still had the time to tweak it before all the code was written and stuff went on in the background. So it meant when the product was handed over after Q&A, it looked how we expected it to look, and it did what we expected it to do. And then it was some tweaking and normal stuff, but we got to that point incredibly quickly once this process was completed. So it was very helpful.
It's an interesting point as well, because I think most people look at low code apps and think they're not beautiful. And I think, again, more so because vibe coded apps look the same. I can tell you if something's been vibe coded. And so that, although people say, hey, there's this new role of product engineers, actually, I think a design step is really necessary. It can be accelerated with AI, but design is a differentiator today. So our process here was doing discovery, doing design, then developing, which we spoke about, where we use Bubble, n8n, Flowise, and a few others, and then delivery, where now we continue to support, where you have product iterations. And I think that's important, because it wasn't actually building the complete dream product from version 1. It was something that was great and helpful and added value, but then you would get feedback and then say, hey, let's add Salesloft, hey, let's add Salesforce App Exchange. And so that is Goodspeed acting as the extension of your product team. Can you just talk about that, like, one, from a business perspective to actually outsource the tech, but then two, from getting customer feedback and then relying on someone to iterate and make the best product?
Well, I think I'll do the last one first. I pitched it to a few organizations, and it was very clear that their sales methodology was really important to them. And so I came back and said, it'd be really handy if we could upload their sales playbooks, product comparison sheets, the scripts, objection handling sheets, and all of that stuff into the model, so that that Sizzlekick was coaching each person more specifically on data that was relevant to that organization. And I can't remember how many hours it was, but it was half a week or something. And Janae did that, she did some quick mock-up, same process, document upload screen, etc. We agreed how the model was going to read that, what document formats it could take in. And then, hey presto, a week later, it was live in the product. And I could go back to the clients and say, right, you can pop your playbook up now. And they're like, wow. So I think that again, that's working with a good development partner, obviously, who knows what they're doing, but also that must be a function of the flexibility of Bubble to be able to do that quickly. So being able to do that and customers being impressed that we listened, reacted, and delivered is really important. And I guess that feeds into outsourcing your development. I think you've got to pick someone who's got a solid process and checks and balances, and is very switched on to technology and the landscape and how it's changing, so that you don't find yourself using old stuff, because this just keeps moving so quickly. And I don't think to have that capability in-house would be very tricky and quite risky, whereas I know Harry's got great people on his team with a breadth of different areas of expertise who can call on when things change, or if we want to do something slightly different. So I think outsourcing is much more effective for us. And the final piece I would say is that we ask for a price for something, and then that's really good, because we then make a business case for why we should invest that money in that thing. Whereas when you have an internal dev team, I know we always used to keep finding things for them to do because we had a big salary bill, and if they were sat there doing nothing, it was a waste of money. So we quite often ended up bloating our products because we were just making stuff, they were just working on stuff that wasn't maybe actually necessary. That was way back in the day, obviously not now. So that would be my sort of position on outsourcing.
So for those who have Salesforce, and if you know anyone who has Salesforce,
Yeah, please.
we can help set them up with a trial of Sizzlekick. And Andy, you also you're working on something else.
Yes. Yeah. So glad you mentioned it, Harry. Maybe we can put it in the thing, the links to our websites while I'm talking. Yeah. So we learned so much through the Sizzlekick product experience. I had genuinely really first-class experience with the Goodspeed team, that we then decided, we had the We Thrive product, about 150 customers on there, and we were looking at, should we have, they're all asking us, what are you doing about AI? How are you going to leverage that to help our people be happier and more effective at work? And so we had the choices of just sprinkling a little, or they do it now like this, don't they, that sprinkling a bit of AI on it and hoping that stuck, or actually going right back and saying, what is it that what could we really do here? What's the art of the possible? And should we build something from scratch? And we took let's build something from scratch, which was pretty punchy for us. So we agreed a new project with Harry's team. The product's called rollkick.com, and it's been built from scratch. Again, similar, exactly the same process. So we've gone through the process twice, and the product looks amazing. We've been showing it to our customers, and they're just blown away. It addresses almost every single gripe that they had with the old product, and has added in new layers of sophistication that I just can't believe have been achieved. So the process worked twice for us now. So yeah, Rollkick is a strategic talent management platform, and what's different about that is it's about connecting every single individual with the strategic objectives of the organization, so that their day-to-day work is aligned with the direction of travel of the business. And then everything from engagement surveys to onboarding to performance management are all streaming them in to achieve that objective and help make the organization move faster. And everyone in the organization gets an AI coach to help coach them in terms of their own development, their delivery of the work. So it's really a game changer in that space, because all of our competitors, because of that technical debt, have had to just bolt AI in and stick it on here and there, and I don't think that really works. Whereas we've got it right through the core, but with the beautiful option of switching it off in areas that you might not want it to work in. So again, a really elegant solution, and yeah, very exciting,
and one that lots of people on the call can benefit from, for sure. Cool.
For sure.
Thank you so much, Andy.